The Peacehaven Ghost. Andrew Flack stood on Peacehaven beach, feeling the tears well in his eyes as he looked out into the December mist. He had retreated in exile at the end of a disastrous relationship over the previous year from a flat beneath Chichester's north walls, and a friend in nearby Felpham had offered to put him up while he got back on his feet. Half an hour later, he found himself in a corner of the Fox public house in Felpham, where a few hundred years before the poet and mystic William Blake had said the equivalent of "fuck the king" to a soldier, and found himself soon on trial at the Chichester Assizes for the crime of sedition. While he would have been at his thatched cottage just up the road, writing the words for Jerusalem, or at least thinking about them, Drew sat with a cappuccino and planned the opening of the Octopus, a music and arts cafe venue. Via social networking and the ease of Facebook Messenger, he was able to reasonably quickly put together an investment team of local music lovers, wanting somewhere that at least they could go and hear music that they liked. He investigated a couple of restrictive-looking pub franchises before discovering the somewhat unloved That Place in Peacehaven, a mock Tudor, mid-terrace, multi-purpose building, leaseholders of which, however, seemed a little too desperate to pass it on. Whether that was because of trying to operate a restaurant in the middle of a decade of austerity, their own lack of imagination, or another as yet unknown reason, was itself as yet unknown to Drew. Bleak midwinter turned into a more promising spring, and Drew and his new, quiet partners avoided heavy legal costs by paying rent direct to the leaseholder, as Drew paid a deposit and started to plan for the Octopus's opening night. One afternoon, as he was holding an investors' meet-up at the local Hardwick pub, Robin Scarf appeared unannounced, ordered half a pint of cider, and sat down next to him. She was a curious mix of sultry, ambitious, and bashful, and Drew quickly understood that she wanted into the Octopus more deeply than he had imagined. Robin had been an English teacher at a local academy school for the past few years, after a stint working in the city while keeping her marriage together with a husband who was having a great deal of difficulty bereaving his parents. 2 of their sons had left for university, and the third was showing the strain of family life, one of whom was deeply Christian, Robin, the other of whom was an atheist, trying to deal with the intractable complexities of grief. Like everyone attracted to the Octopus, they were also not indifferent to the mixed appeal of drink. Indeed, it was this appeal that largely made the venue a roaring success for much of the year that it was. Darren Guildford was a local guitarist whom Drew had met while watching his urban indie funk band Crash, looking for potential opening night acts. Guildford started to come to the Octopus every day, helping out, becoming friends with Drew and Robin, becoming de facto assistant manager. He was a semi-full-time carer to his niece, while also being semi-professional in 2 bands, and far too cool for a regular job. His humour quickly lifted many stressful moments at the venue and became his main value.
The opening night arrived one Friday in mid-April, and all Peacehaven seemed to attend. Younger, lower middle class at the front, older, middle-aged fallen bohemians at the back. Crash fitted 6 men with machines onto the venue's small, rectangular black stage, backdropped by sheer black velvet curtains, and delivered their smooth tales of semi-urban romantic misadventures. Matt Michaels, a late Britpopper, big in 1996, followed, welcoming the Octopus to the faded grandeur of the Sussex coast, before strumming out a few of his own minor hits on a mini Spanish guitar. Watched by man-sized portraits of recently departed spiritual guides David Bowie and Prince, painted by local cabin-dwelling Blake, update Don Blaine, whom Drew had also commissioned to paint an enormous coal account-type mural in the venue's high-walled backyard. The opening night was a sellout success. Drew, Robin, and Darren hoped for continuance of this, as Drew booked artists and marketed the place to the local media. Robin brought stock and handled legal details, and Darren was asked to tear up the blue carpet on the upper floors of the 3-story building.
He took to this with aplomb. Their road wasn't in the town centre, so interested audience from the catchment area needed to be attracted to constant events by social media adverts, local radio jingles, and some leafleting. This kept Drew busy most days, while Darren worked on turning the double bedroom on the 4th floor into Blake's Gallery, a room on the top floor into the Mental Traveller, and Drew moved into the larger room next to it. The other 3 bedrooms were rented out, first as bed and breakfast, then later as permanent residences. One afternoon in mid-May, the management trio were having an ad hoc meeting by the bar, and Darren had only been down from pulling up the stair carpet for 5 minutes. The knockings that Drew had thought were coming from works next door seemed to be coming from the gallery, but also from about 6 other locations at once. A knock here, a bang there, a tap on the pipes there. Drew caught Darren's eye. "What is that?" the former asked. "No idea. All day long though, constant," replied Darren in his estuarine tone, matter-of-fact mixed with ominous curiosity. The nightly events continued, with acoustic concerts here, poetry readings there, cover bands at weekends, and lock-ins with trusted regulars started to become normal. The bangings and knockings would seem to go on in sleep cycles, 4 hours on, 16 hours off, returning louder than before, then quieter. It became quite the talk of the locals, even if the venue itself was more the talk of the other venues of the area. Other landlords were near obsessed, so in the news the octopus was on a regular basis. One night, when there were some percussive types on stage, and Drew was promoting from behind his laptop station in the corner, behind the music you could hear a powerful thumping sound coming from behind a picture. It started to predict the start of Unexplained activity from around 10:30, and almost on time the abstract started to visibly vibrate as a combination of the rhythms and the thumping from the staircase behind the picture. Later that night, Drew was alone in his room, and the bangings became sense-around, their intensity building all around him, coming one moment from the ceiling above him, the next from unknown pipes rooms away. Whatever it was seemed mysteriously furious with him, and surrounded him until he hurried on his white dressing gown and slippers, and ran downstairs to the venue. Neil Stubbs, a music journalist turned band manager who had decamped to Peacehaven from London some years before, slurred laconically from his pew at the end of the bar. "Drew, nice of you to join us. You all right, mate? You look like you've seen a ghost. Darren, another please, and one for Drew." "You do look alarmed, mate. Come in, sit down," reassured Darren, noting Drew's ashen face, and realising it would have taken quite something for his friend to come all the way down to the bar from the top of the building. The next afternoon, Drew was in the small bathroom next to his room, alone in the building. There was one loud thump coming from what felt directly below the toilet cistern. Another 30 seconds later, louder and somehow more insistent. And just as Drew was beginning to panic, a final deafening thwack, almost evicting him by force from the room. Later that evening, with a glass of wine each, Drew told Robin and Darren about what had been happening to him recently. The pair glanced at each other. "A few nights ago, I was having a roll-up out of the kitchen door. There was no wind, but all 3 outhouse doors started swinging open and closed of their own accord," said Robin, the spiritual senses twinkling behind her deep brown eyes. I was coming out of the upstairs kitchen with Darren later, and the force rushed past us onto the brick stairway. I remember hearing about some guy 20 or years ago dying of a drugs overdose in one of the upstairs rooms, but it could just be gossip. Might not even be true, said Darren. A couple of evenings later, Drew was serving a train engineer regular and his friend at the bar, bending over to reach a glass from a low shelf. At that moment, a pint glass wobbled and flew from a head-height shelf behind the bar, just missing him before he got up, its handle smashing onto the hard lino floor. The two customers looked at each other open-mouthed, then at Drew, as he silently grabbed the dustpan and brush and swept up the detritus. Later that night, after everyone had gone and the venue seemed peaceful, he isolated and saved the CCTV footage of the glass and posted it online as the Peacehaven Ghost. Proof behind all the anecdotal stories from the venue was useful, he thought. A few nights later, a local two-girl, one-boy punk band were playing to a sparsely populated venue, and Drew was manning the soundboard from beneath the portraits of Bowie and Prince. Halfway through the second song, a red-rimmed, glass-fronted clock flew from a secure shelf high above the bar to his left. It smashed on the floor between two stunned customers, who again looked over to him, open-mouthed. Later on, he again isolated the wobbling then flying clock on the CCTV and uploaded it as the Peacehaven Ghost 2. Proof of one unexplained physical event looked like appropriate diligence. Proof of two in close proximity might start to look like a campaign. Soon afterwards, as Drew was crossing the rear courtyard to climb the stairs at dusk, between afternoon and evening shifts, found Robin pacing up and down in the kitchen, barefooted, speaking what sounded to him in tongues. He knew that Robin was deeply interested in the spiritual world, in line with her religion and interest in William Blake's mystical side. But it hadn't occurred to him that she might also have skills. As part of his research into potential customers for art and music on the South Coast, Drew had met Claire Plath, a determinedly free spirit from nearby Worthing. She had visited him at the Octopus a handful of times, but they spoke on the ubiquitous messenger and by text often. One night, after everyone had left, they were enjoying a glass of wine together in the low light of the bar. After telling her about what had been happening, and having seen the online videos, Claire said, "You're serious, aren't you? There are no such things as ghosts," as if she were trying to reassure a child before bed. As if on cue, the white plastic handle of the back kitchen door some 10 meters away flapped noisily up and down 5 or 6 times. Drew and Claire looked at each other, and they both headed to check the door in the courtyard. Naturally, there was no one there. When he found himself once again alone the next morning, the spring summer sun was shining on the English Channel of the Sussex coast. So Drew opened the front and back doors to allow a cleansing breeze through the building. As he was preparing a social media post about the following week's events, in an otherwise utterly still moment, into the sounds of Brian Eno's Another Green World playing on the Octopus sound system, he felt a pair of deft hands turn up the collar of his white shirt, almost in order to clear it of his sea blue jacket. Spinning around, the calm of the moment was lost. The actual venue part of the building was the quietest part after hours, most activity seeming to take place on the upper floors. After another intolerable hour of action that night, Drew came down to spend the night on the black leather sofa next to the nighttime covered bay window that looked out onto the road. The next morning he awoke to find the black bag he normally left next to the kitchen door in the middle of the long kitchen, its contents semi-spread across the red tiled floor. Once he had collected himself and cleaned up, he checked the overnight CCTV to find that 2 hours had been totally blank, the cameras for that period inexplicably turned off. A local drummer who had helped set up the venue with Drew had recently turned hostile, sending texts such as, "Hey, Drew, tick-tock, tick-tock," referencing both Drew's stammer and the fact that he had it on inside information that the council were planning on closing the venue due to the regular live performances, and suspected this of serving drinks without an accompanying meal. The Octopus was a libertarian place with a liberal atmosphere, and despite the money it was making and the dozen or so people it employed, the council seemingly wanted Peacehaven to more remain strictly a retirement town. On the third time of visiting, at 11 p.m, and witnessing a happily eating and drinking crowd, post-performance, Drew and Robin were served a summons to court council, citing the lack of a change of use license. Sometimes neither district councils nor the liminal world appreciate non-mandated change, be that either of license conditions or the removal of thick blue carpets. The paintings were taken down and confiscated by the investment team. Robin retired to lick her wounds and try to counsel her still grieving husband, and Drew was forced to abscond to around the corner from Clare in Worthing, the target of a campaign of harassment from some of the disgruntled ex-employees of the venue. It was often wondered why businesses opening in that building in Peacehaven had such a frequent turnover, even one not a tenth as busy as the Octopus had been. John Alderman, an expat American who once brought a wheelchair-using friend to visit a show, might have had the answer. As he accompanied his somewhat empath friend through the entry, the wheels froze. "There's no way I'm going in there, John. Can't you feel it?" she said to John, clearly shaken. John messaged Drew to tell him he would have to continue to support him from afar.